So let's get started with our next application. We're finally at that point. This is going to be a friends application, very similar to a contacts database, and it's going to contain just a few bits of information about a friend, but we're going to go through and use the process to show you how to create an app with a database using a content provider. So in this first video, we're going to create the project for the first time and then start work on the database code. So let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to create a new Android Studio project by clicking Start. And I'm going to call this one quite simply Friends. Application name is Friends. Click on Next. I'm going to accept the defaults, API 16, phone and tablet. I'm going to make sure TV Wear and Glass is not ticked. I'm going to just choose a blank activity, leave all the default names and click Finish. Okay, so we've loaded now. We've got our empty project. The first thing we're going to do is go into the Java package and click on the package where we've got our main activity class, and we're going to create three basic classes. I'm going to click on New Java class. First one I'm going to call is Friends Database. I'm going to create another one, New Java class, and we'll call this one Friends Provider. Then the third one we're going to create is New Java class again, Friends Contract. And we'll be going through explaining what they are as we go through. So the first thing we're going to do now we've created those, or the next thing I should say, we're going to double click Friends Database and we're going to use that. So we're going to create some functionality. So the first thing we want to use is we're going to use a function of SQLite for this database called, it's actually a class called SQLite Open Helper. So we're going to extend that. We're going to use that functionality in that class. So we're going to type extends SQLite Open Helper. So that's a class that helps us setting up databases and creating databases and that type of thing. So we'll talk more about that shortly. So let's create a basic tag that we can use. Static. It's a good idea to do this for all your classes. And I'm going to make it very simple. Friends database.class, and make that a string equals friends database.class.get simple name. So we can use that in our logs. And we want to store the database name. So we're going to put a private static final string database underscore name. And we're going to call it friends.db. So that's the name of the database that's going to be recorded, stored on the Android device. And we need a version number for the database. Private static final int database version equals 2. Now, you might be wondering why are we not making that 1? We're going to make it 2. I'm going to leave a comment there, but I'll explain that a little bit later because I want to talk to you about show you how to do upgrades. So to do that, we need to start with a database version other than 1. Normally, when you're creating a new app, you would start on version 1 for your database. Doesn't really matter; it's just a number, but you'll see that'll make more sense in a future video when we talk about upgrades. Okay, we now also need to store the context. So we need a private final context, mcontext. Now next we need an interface. Type interface tables, and that's going to be the list of tables in this application. And we're going to have a definition. It's quite a simple database, only the one table, but if you had more, this is where you'd put them. And friends is going to be the name of the table. So it's the database name is friends. The table name is also going to be friends. I'm going to type friends like so. And that's our interface. Then next we need to create a constructor. So I'm going to type public friends database context super context. And we're going to pass the parameters to the class that we've subclassed, the database underscore name, null, which you'll find out, we'll talk about that shortly, and database version it also needs. Then we need to store our context, so mcontext equals context. All right, that's some basic code. Now, by the way, we're still getting an error, and that's because we haven't implemented a couple of abstract methods that we need to implement, called onCreate, and also there's another one called onUpgrade, but we'll talk about that shortly. But essentially what this class does, this SQLite Open Helper does, it makes the complex processes of opening and closing databases a lot easier. And we'll look at this in more detail, but essentially if I just go in there quickly, you can see that it's got a lot of functionality built in, sort of stores the context and stores the database, a link to that, and there's various helper methods to help us create databases, create or open, those types of things. So we'll talk more about that in a future video, but this is really just the basics of the database code we need. All right, so I'm going to end this video here. In the next video, we'll move on and talk about the Friends Contract class.